Chapter 26. The Coriolis Effect. As I walked, I thought about how tracking things down is very hard. Tracking the weather is one of the most difficult things of all. You can spot a hurricane as it crosses the ocean, but not know the exact path it will take or when and where it will hit land. There are too many variables that alter its course, such as the Coriolis Effect. The Coriolis Effect is very interesting. You can't see the Coriolis Effect, you can't touch it, but it exists. It deflects things. It's a powerful force in the world. This is how it works. As you know, the Earth rotates. If you're standing on the equator, you rotate with it 40,000 kilometres in 24 hours. You're going at 1,670 kilometres an hour, but you feel like you're standing still. The speed that you don't realise you are doing is your tangential velocity. But if you stand on the North Pole, you don't go any distance at all. You go round on the spot. Your tangential velocity is zero. The Coriolis effect happens because of the difference between these two tangential velocities. If you throw something from the equator towards the North Pole, it won't go straight but crooked. The difference in tangential velocities deflects or distorts it. Your missile lands a little to the right, but if you were standing on the equator and launched a missile to the south, it would land to the left, not the right. Right in the northern hemisphere, left in the southern hemisphere. It is like the different directions of the water swirling down the plug hole. As I walked away from our house, I thought about the Coriolis effect. I thought about Salim's disappearance. Perhaps tracking Salim was like tracking the weather, only without knowing what the Coriolis effect is. We don't know what had deflected him off his course, but something had. I thought about distortion, deflection, whirlwinds and weather. I thought about north, south, male, female, full, empty, anti-clockwise, clockwise. I stopped on a corner. I realised I had gone the wrong way and wasn't sure where I was. I'm a dyslexic geographer. I forget my left from my right. My hand was shaking itself out until I looked up and saw the cumulus cloud I'd noticed earlier. It had grown into a cumulonimbus. It hung down from a glowering sky behind London's tower blocks. Rain or hail, possibly thunder, approached. I headed back in the direction I'd come from, back past our house and towards the cloud. Somehow it felt correct. Sure enough, soon I was out on the main road, and from there I could see the underground station. Being a dyslexic geographer, I can't read maps. I never know if I should read them upright or upside down. But there's one map I can read, which is the one of the London Underground. Because it's a topological map, you are in a universe where the spaces between points don't matter, and all that counts is the sequence of stops and where the lines cross. You could stretch the tube map into all sorts of hoops and loops, and it would be the same map, as long as the junctions were the same. I stood at the tube map for a very long time. Then I found Earl's Court. It was on the green line and on the blue line. This meant I had to get the black line to Embankment and change onto the green line, or take the black line to Leicester Square and change onto the blue line. I decided the Embankment route was shorter. I bought a travel card and went down to the platform. I put my hand in my jacket pocket to stop it from shaking itself out. The sign said a train to High Barnet via Charing Cross was due. I heard a rumble in the tunnel, and then the train came into the station like a silver streak of lava pouring down a volcano. The doors opened. I went in and took a seat. The carriage was half full, or half empty, depending on how you looked at it. Some graffiti was scratched onto the glass window opposite. No way. It was razor-etched, with slashing parallel white lines for each stroke of every letter. This was a bad thing somebody had done, just for the sake of it, like why Dr. Death killed his patients. A bad feeling started in my esophagus. Usually when I get the tube, I am with Kat and Mum and sometimes Dad. I like to tell them in advance what the next stop is, which shows how well I can read the map, and I also say how many more stops we have to go, but they were not with me. So I counted the stations and said their names in my head. That way I wouldn't forget to get off when I had to. Between Waterloo and Embankment, the trains go under the Thames. It is a long stop. I saw a man staring hard at an advertisement for car insurance. He was sitting under the graffiti sign, and his eyebrows were close together. There were lines on his forehead, and his lips were pressed together, which meant he was angry. He also had a plaster on his cheek. I remembered how Sherlock Holmes once amazed Watson by working out Watson's train of thought. A train of thought is a good way to describe someone's series of connected thoughts because they are attached to each other like carriages are by couplers. Holmes did this by watching Watson's face and the things he was staring at and making deductions. So, I worked out that the man opposite me was having a train of thought about a car crash he had had, which was why he had an injury, and that the advertisement for car insurance made him angry because he had not been insured. I was so pleased with this piece of deductive thinking that I nearly forgot to get out when the train stopped. A woman's voice announced, "This station is Embankment. Please take care when leaving the train, as there is a gap between the train and the station platform." I jumped up with my hand flapping and only just made it through the doors before they closed. Then I nearly fell down the gap, but didn't. I followed the signs for the Green Line, westbound. I got a train that said Ealing Broadway on the front. I had 7 stops to go. It was a brighter journey, closer to the surface. I could see flashes of daylight. I could smell damp. I didn't try to work out what any of my fellow passengers were thinking, but kept concentrating on the order of stops, and at Earl's Court I got out. The weather had changed. Hail was bouncing off the corrugated station roof. Hail is a shower of irregular lumps of ice and always comes from cumulonimbus clouds, so I knew I was right under the cloud I'd seen forming earlier. Judging by the sound, these stones might be 10 to 15 millimetres wide. I went through the ticket barrier. I stood in the ticket hall, blinking at the signs for different exits. A station guard came over. "Hey," he said, "you boy, you lost?" I considered whether or not I should speak to him. Everyone knows you're not supposed to speak to strangers. We'd spoken to the strange man at the London Eye, and perhaps that's why we were in such trouble. But this man was in a London Underground uniform, and this meant it was his job to help lost passengers. "Yes," I said. "Where are you going?" he said. "Earl's Court." "This is Earl's Court," he said. "Maybe you're after the exhibition centre." "The exhibition centre," I agreed. "Go up those stairs, keep straight on through to the tube exit, and it's opposite. Huge, can't miss it," he said. He didn't once say, "Go left, go right." He just pointed in the right direction. Perhaps he was a dyslexic geographer too. "Remember to duck the hail," he called after me. Perhaps he was a meteorologist too. I made my way up the station stairs, veering slightly to the right as I did so. This was because I was imagining that I was a missile being hurled from the equator into the northern hemisphere, so the amount that I veered was equal to the deflection caused by the Coriolis force, and this made me feel good. Chapter 27. Biker Hell.